Our keynote is Torgny Holmgren. He's an economist by training, and he's the executive director of the Stockholm International Water Institute that helps inform decision makers of smart water policy and sustainable development. He was ambassador at the Swedish Ministry for Foreign Affairs and head of the Department for Development Policy, and he was responsible for policies on global sustainable development. He also served as Sherpa for the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on global sustainability, and he served on the board of directors in the research department of the World Bank. The title of his talk is Organizing to Combat the Global Water Crisis.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and I have the privilege to wrap up this most interesting conference. And before sharing with you some thoughts of how to combat the global water crisis in the future, I will start by bringing you 760 years back in time. That is the time in 1252 when Stockholm, the capital city of Sweden in Scandinavia, was established and founded. And Stockholm is based and also located at the mouth of a freshwater lake and the Baltic Sea. And it's a very good location, both of security matters and trade, but also water-wise. So over the years, Stockholm expanded, immigration from the countryside, but when we entered into the 1800s, the city was one of the most unhealthy places to live in, at least when it comes to cities in Europe. We had cholera epidemics, mortality rate higher than the birth rate. You know, at that time, more or less half of the population of Sweden emigrated over here. So today, there are more Swedish ancestors in the US than Swedes in Sweden. And so the city was quite bad shape. So something has to be done to reactivate that. So a slow change took place from the 1850s onwards. Well, we learned more about the connection between dirty water and health. There was also a law introducing compulsory schooling, primary schooling in Sweden, knowledge about the benefit of hand washing, and these three elements, ideas about how to handle water, schooling, and hand washing, by a number of years, increased life expectancy by 10 years. So that was a very crucial decisions and knowledge-based directions in the mid and late 1800s. And first waterworks were invested in 1861, and eventually, coming into the 20th century, also wastewater treatment plants. So there was an improvement in access to clean drinking water. That meant better health. Development took place on more water and waterworks and wastewater works. And the core idea was to integrate the environmental, social, and economic aspects. Even maybe city council and people at that time didn't pronounce it in that way, but that was the essence of what took place. So by late 20th century, we had a quite successful achievement when it came to the water situation in the capital city. At that time, we merged the wastewater treatment and also the waterworks into one public company, Stockholm Water Incorporated, with the mission to make Stockholm one of the cleanest cities in the world in terms of water and sanitation. And the success factors behind that was, of course, we have access to high quality raw water supply. I mentioned this freshwater lake, which is just at the shores of Stockholm. We also have a WAN organization handling both water and wastewater. A lot of interaction between policymakers and researchers. Performance indicators were introduced, and also a cost recovery funding base for running this. And this meant and led to that today we can fish and swim in the city center. You can see, if you come to Stockholm summertime, people angling salmon outside the Royal Castle, and you can have for your dinner meal, and you can swim, etc. So it's now one of the cleanest cities in the world, at least when it comes to capital cities, when it comes to water. Well, that was the beginning of what we now celebrate as the annual World Water Week in Stockholm. In the late 20th century, 1991, we introduced the International Scientific Symposium on Global Water Issues, the Stockholm Water Symposium. Now we have the World Water Week, a full week, end of August, early September every year, where we gather some 2,600-700 participants. Last it was from 130 countries coming to Stockholm. We have a mix of government officials, researchers, ministers, civil society, non-governmental organizations, etc., and also businessmen or businesswomen nowadays. And the idea is to exchange ideas and foster solutions and learn from each other and develop new solutions. And this year it will, sorry? Yeah. It will, yeah, at the time of the Stockholm World Water Week, we also have some prize ceremonies. We do award the Stockholm Water Prize, which the King of Sweden is the patron of, and it's also handed over at the top picture there from out of the hands of the King to the winner organization or a person. We also have at this lower part the Stockholm Junior Water Prize, and that is Crown Princess Victoria, and she spent some time here at Yale, so she's aware of Yale as well as very interested in water and water-related issues. Now, this year, the Water Week will take place first week of September, dealing with, which is the International Year of Water Cooperation in building partnerships. Next year, we will focus on energy and water. We had food security and water last year, and in 2015, we go for water and development. Well, that's for an introduction. The Stockholm Institute, or the Stockholm International Water Institute, was established in 1991 at the time the Water Symposium was established, and we have a mission of a water-wise world. We are a policy-oriented institute, policy-making institute, also the research arm. We are a non-for-profit, politically neutral institute, a foundation nowadays with some 60 staff members from more or less 20 countries working in Stockholm. We are supported by the government of Sweden, the city of Stockholm, but mainly and foremost, we do run programs and activities and projects worldwide funded by donors, governments, agencies, UN, World Bank, and others. And we do focus on 5 areas, and I think all areas have been related to or discussed today: water governance, transboundary water, climate change and water, water, food and energy, and water economics. And I will now focus on 4 of these areas: the water and energy, water and food, transboundary water, and climate and water, from the perspectives of the governance and then economics field. Let me start off just a short picture here on the global water use. Well, this is average figures, but we know that freshwater demand, according to estimates, will be outstrip sustainable supply by the year 2030 by 40%. So that is maybe the starting point of what we call the Looming crisis. Today, more or less on average globally, food production is about calculated for, estimated to take some 70% of the global water withdrawals, energy sector 20%, and households 10%. On food, there is a paradox. There is today enough food to feed all people of the world. I often call to IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington, D.C., to ask Schengen Fund, what is the situation? Enough food is produced. And actually, more food is produced than it's consumed. And that is a paradox in itself. Today, almost 1/3 of all food produced worldwide is not eaten or consumed. In our part of the world, in the northern hemisphere, we do waste. We don't eat all food that is produced. In low-income countries, food produced is not coming to the table because due to bad infrastructure, no storage, etc. So we know that heavy investments in taking place in food production, and at the end of the day, some 30 to 40% is not even consumed or eaten. And I don't know any other sector in our society economy that produces 100% of something, and then at the end, it's not consumed. So that is a real challenge. And if you do consider all investments taking place energy-wise, human resources, and water that goes into that production, then you really have a real challenge. And we know that today, food production continues to rise, but still, almost 1 billion people are hungry or under the poverty line. We have another 2 billion, that are undernourished. And as a matter of fact, one problem is also 1.5 billion overeat, and that is also something that we now also notice in what used to be developing countries, but what I would call middle-income countries. So the scarcity of water in the food production supply chain could also be seen from a geographic approach, where we know that more or less half of the world population lives between the 20th and 40th latitude north of the equator, but only 1/8 of world population lives south of the equator. And we know that in between the 20th and 40th latitude, we on average have some 500 millimeter precipitation on an annual basis, only one harvest. And I think that is one reason why we do see more and more what is labeled land acquisitions nowadays, that you need to go to places where there is water and availability to produce food. And even if today only 10% of all food produced worldwide is traded in between states, I think that is a figure that will increase in the future. But in this category, or in this part of the world, we have also most of the world's related poverty and development challenges. And these most populated latitudes are also the scarcest on water. So here we have a real problem geographic-wise, but also when it comes to production of staple foods. Now, it's Friday afternoon, and it's time to see some film. So I will show you a film.
It's going to work, too.
I hope so.
We depend on it entirely. Fresh water is life. Water makes things grow. Water is food, yet we waste it. Worldwide, 1/3 of our food is lost or wasted. 1.3 billion tons of food are thrown away each year, leading to an incalculable waste of water, energy, and investments, with repercussions for both land and people. Shipped around the globe, food is increasingly demanded far from where it was grown. Wherever waste occurs, it drains resources that are growing scarce around the world. Tossing out an apple is equivalent to 7 times the water flushed down a toilet. If 1 liter of milk is thrown away, in effect it's much more than just a liter. It's about 1,000 liters of water needed for the cows and to grow their feed. Since roughly 3 times more food comes from rain-fed agriculture, the true misuse of water is much greater. The food waste in North America and Europe alone could feed all of the world's hungry 3 times over. But food waste is a global issue. In prosperous societies, food is wasted on a staggering scale at the retail and consumer levels, whereas in developing countries, a similar amount is lost due to lack of storage facilities, marketing arrangements, and insufficient transport. What kind of corporate management would accept 33% in annual losses? Different challenges require different solutions. In the global north, we ought to scrutinize inconsistent standards such as best before dates, support corporate initiatives, reconsider trade and labor legislation, and give more thought to sustainable diets. On a global scale, overeating is much more common than undernutrition and has implications for food demand as well as public health. In developing countries, agricultural infrastructure and transport must be improved to enhance access to markets. This will benefit farmers as well as consumers. As a global community, we share existing water resources as a source of life, but increasingly we are going to share their scarcity too. Our global water resources are limited and highly variable. They might not keep up with population growth and people's choices of diet. The pressure on our freshwater resources is severe, even more so in the course of climate change, where food waste also plays a role. Agriculture accounts for a significant contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. An estimated 10% of global warming is being caused solely by our waste of food. Growing food needs plenty of energy, but it takes many times that energy to process, cook and refrigerate food. As a consequence, the waste of resources is even worse when we throw away packaged or ready cooked food. But worst of all is when we throw away meat. 1 kilogram of meat calls for up to 10 times more water than the same weight in cereal grains. Most of this water is used to grow animal feed. An excessive demand for food obtained from animals increasingly swallows up water and land. Producing one single hamburger, for instance, uses up 2,400 litres of water, with the meat part accounting for 2,200 litres. With each burger, a stack of 16 bathtubs full of water is consumed. From field to fork, our food supply chain has lots of leaks. Before producing even more, let's run an efficiency check first. By reducing food losses and waste, overeating and an excessive demand for meat, there would not only be more food to feed the hungry, we would win back water, soil fertility and energy too. Multiple wins are within reach and without sacrificing a thing.
What needs then to be done? What could be done? If you look at some of the possible solutions, or at least investments that need to be done in developing countries or low-income countries, I may say investment in more efficient infrastructure in the food supply chain. So a lot of activities outside the water sector itself needs to be taken, mainly infrastructure investments. In high-income countries is to waste less food and keep a more balanced diet in the future. And common for all parts of the world is to look at more efficient use of water in the food production supply chain, which means that there is a need of incentive system and I think valuation or pricing, if you may, of water, as it's believed to be a free good. But that is one part of to solve the water overuse and scarcity of water also in the food production chain. Let us now turn to water and energy. It has been said a number of occasions during this conference that there is a very close relationship and linkages between water and energy. We know we need water to extract and refine energy for hydropower, thermoelectric cooling, fuel production in a number of senses. And energy is also crucial for water, wastewater treatment, energy associated with use of water, drinking water treatment, extraction and transmission. And I believe that a lot of what we pay as a consumer today for water is actually the energy input into the water, not the water itself as a good, but the water content of the energy. So water is a central component in the energy mix, we know. We know at the same time that energy demand is growing rapidly with increased GDP per capita in a number of countries in the world, higher living standards, etc. There is a forecast that energy demand will grow by 50% just in 20 years' time. At the same time, as with food, we know that 1.6 billion lack access to electricity and another 1.4 billion lack access to modern fuel for cooking, heating and lighting. So we also know that water and energy policies have been developed more or less in isolation, and I think there is a great need for the two communities to come together because they do depend on each other. And one paradox here is, and one very problematic, I will say, also challenge is that what I also elaborated upon a bit on the food production is the pricing. There are so different mechanisms. While energy is priced on the market, you know hour by hour what you pay for your energy bill. You can, in your household, in your house or in dwelling, see exactly what you have consumed in energy. What water is not. It's a human right, it's a public good, and how do you value water right with that continuation? And that is a real challenge, because as in the production chain today, we don't value water at its right cost. We also have other challenges without the costing. We have the shale gas, oil sands, the fracking. What does that mean? Impact on water resources and environment. We have also a huge demand for water in new efficient cooling technologies for power production. We know what the former panel told us a bit about the competition between bioenergy versus food production, and what I mentioned just before, the real value. How do you value water at its right cost or value for production of energy? So pricing of water, I think, is of essence when it comes to the mix or the linkages between water and energy. Transboundary water, another field that I would like to raise, it's what we deal with when it comes to countries or regions that share the same river basin. It could be lakes, it could be aquifers. And this map shows us and you that a huge part of the world is dependent on shared river or shared water sources. As a matter of fact, 75% of all countries in the world are riparians in shared river basins. There are some 200 countries. I think UN has 192 members. Over 50% of all available freshwater resources are in shared river basins. And 33 countries, which is more or less one-fourth of the globe's number of countries, have 95% or more of their water in shared river basins. And when you are, especially in arid regions, water and shared water is becoming a national security issue. So in the 80s, some 30 years ago, water was, and today also is a source of conflict. And we believe that a number of countries would go to war over water resources. And Boutros Ghali, who was then defense minister in Egypt, claimed that next war in the Middle East will be about water. And King Hussein of Jordan also said that only reason I will go to war again with Israel is water. But, and that is I will show you some figures soon, we realize that on water you do tend rather to cooperate than go to armed conflicts. There are conflicts, and a number of conflicts, and as Peter mentioned earlier on, maybe the conflicts are on the increase right now. But mainly, our experience is that regions, countries do cooperate on water issues. And why is that? Well, I think the connection to food is of essence here. As you are, in most cases, you would like to produce your own food. And if you don't have water, you cannot produce your food for your population in your country. But then we started more or less to increase our trade on food supplies, which means that you import water rather than produce it yourself. And this virtual water, I think, is a key component in why we don't have seen that many armed conflicts that you could expect some 30 or 20 years ago. And with increased trade on food, you also import water in that sense. And even if the political rhetoric is there, it might be mainly more for the domestic audience. And we are engaged ourselves from our institute in a number of discussions in Jordan River, Nile Basin, Mekong River, and other places on a technical level, and that is most interesting, on a technical level there have been already in the most tense situations between countries where you could more or less foresee that there should be an armed conflict. There is a discussion often on a technical level between water utilities and also in different regions on water cooperation. And that is some research I will show you from Oregon State University with Wolf that have analyzed a number of transboundary water events over quite a long time period, and found out that on the right-hand side, on the blue bars, that is the number of events when you find kind of cooperation rather than going to conflict. On the left-hand side, the red bars are when you go to the very far end, it's armed conflict, and then you have different connotations of conflict and go into cooperation. So we do see more a tendency that countries and regions do cooperate on water, on shared water resources, than go to conflict. But there is, and as Peter mentioned, there might be a trend now that we do see some more intrastate rather than in states rather than in between states conflicts. So what can we possibly do when it comes to transboundary water? Well, is to support, as usual, the weaker parts, should it be country or municipalities or regions or whatever it is, provinces, in the negotiation, because this is a power game. Shared water and transboundary is a power. If it's political power or your power in your analytical capacity, etc., that is for sure. You could also provide, as an outside partner to a transboundary water relationship, identify the benefits of cooperation, because that is also our experience. When we do see that countries do cooperate on water in tense situations, that could spill over to other sectors of the society economy as well. So there is a benefit of water cooperation, and cooperation could be improved, of course, itself. Now, turning to climate change and water, which has been the main focus of discussions today. I will take it from a governance perspective. On the global level, we know we have the climate change negotiations, the UNFCCC negotiations, and as a matter of fact, I think that has been the conclusion today. Climate change is about water. We see there is a close linkage also when it comes to mitigation and adaptation, and water is the link in this area as well. The Copenhagen Accord from 2009 decided that by 2020 there is a need, or there should be a fundraising by $100 billion for low-income countries, developing countries, for their adaptation mitigation measures. I think that is a low figure. The World Bank had a estimate of some 400 billion a few years ago. We have discussion going on now worldwide on the post-2015 development agenda. You know, these Millennium Development Goals are coming to an end 2 years from now, and they should be replaced by something. And in Rio de Janeiro last year, at the Rio +20 conference, it was decided by the member states of United Nations to establish what is labeled the Sustainable Development Goals, and that is now being both discussed and analyzed in a number of contexts all over the world. And I think there is water is a key component in the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals to come. Now, on climate change, that was the global picture. A lot of global focus on discussions, UNFCCC, the climate change negotiations, etc. Now let us also look at the national and local level, because climate change is a fact. The effects are on local level. I think the national level is closely related and linked to the global level. Often the negotiators are also leading partners in their national capacities. So there are a lot of good national policies and strategies of high quality. But then we do see more or less a disconnect to the local level. At the local level, you often, and maybe mainly in low-income countries and middle-income countries, you lack capacity, you lack resources, and you don't have that close linkage to the national level. And I think that is a challenge, how to ensure implementation of national policies and strategies at the local level, and how to learn from the local level, building into the national strategies. Often national strategies tend to relate maybe more to the global discussions and to the specific context at the local level. we have this transferring of funds. How could that be done in an efficient way from the international to the national to the local level? And also, which is key here, always when you do have a huge transfer of funds, how to ensure transparency, accountability, and prevent corruption in the utilization of those funds. Let me give you an example of the local level from Vietnam. This guy and this person was on this photo. He shows where he has a water level rise more or less on an annual basis. And he is based as a farmer in the Mekong Delta. And nowadays we know that in the Mekong Delta you have saltwater intrusion more or less 70 kilometers up the delta, which is also a huge problem for rice farmers. And what kind of support can he and his family get, and what should he do? And I think he has three options. The first one is, this is on the lower bar, is household income, the percent of household income from agriculture. On the vertical axis you have market access. If the household income of agriculture is decreased or stays as it is, he might hang in, step up, or step out. Well, if there is, and you have the influence of increasing climate variability and change also coming there. So he could, with a good adaptation policy, of course, step up, produce more food, and also stay as a farmer. But if that doesn't happen, he might, as we nowadays see also, he and his family maybe decides to migrate, move into the city, to the urban areas. And we know that more or less half of the world population nowadays live in urban areas. Or he could also hang around with his farming on a lower level than before. Nowadays, Vietnam is the second largest rice exporter in the world. To keep that export, of course, they need to also adapt to what I mentioned about the climate change effects taking place now with the saltwater intrusion, and also to have the possibility to continue to grow rice at the fields that in this picture shows an area in the Mekong Delta where you do have flooding regularly. But the problem is when it's sea or salt water coming in, that is not possible then to grow rice any longer. It will also affect the groundwater. So on climate change from a governance perspective, well, link national policies more closely to the local policies, ensure that they are complement each other, learn on and build on from the local level, and strengthen the capacity at the local level. I think those are some of the key concerns for the future of climate change. So, overall conclusions of these 4 areas. For the food production, well, in our part of the world, reduce losses, reduce waste, and also in the developing countries, reduce losses. I think smart investments and change of attitude is needed. Energy, I think pricing or valuation of water is a key component here to improve the allocation of scarce water resources. That goes also for other areas, not only for energy, but I think that is one of the main challenges for water and water community in the future. On transboundary, well, identify benefits of cooperation so you don't enter into armed conflicts, and support the weaker parts in those transboundary areas where you might have a conflict or an armed conflict around the corner. And on climate change, when it comes to governance issues, connect the global and national policies more to the local policies and build on and strengthen the local knowledge and support. So, thank you very much.